What if everything you worked for disappeared in a single text message? Not a meeting, not a warning, just a text. That's how The Devil Wears Prada 2 2026 begins. Before the glamour, before the fashion, before the power struggles, we meet Andy Sachs, played by Anne Hathaway. She is no longer the confused assistant from Runway. Now she is an award-winning investigative journalist, respected, sharp, and finally living the career she once dreamed of. And tonight, she is about to receive the biggest award of her life. The room is full of elites, cameras are flashing, her name is about to be called. But then, her phone vibrates. A message appears. She is fired. And so is her entire newsroom. Just like that. No warning, no dignity, no goodbye. Across the industry, journalism is collapsing. Newspapers are dying. Tech giants are swallowing media companies whole. Writers are being erased by algorithms and budget cuts. Andy doesn't even have time to process it because something else is already moving behind the scenes. At the same time, in a very different world, Miranda Priestly is still ruling Runway. But this is not the Miranda we remember. Time has changed everything. She is still powerful, still elegant, still terrifying. But something is different. The world no longer fears her the same way. HR now watches her every word. One wrong comment and consequences follow. And worse, Runway has just published a scandalous article praising a fashion brand that secretly uses unethical labor. The internet explodes. Advertisers threaten to leave. Runway's future begins to collapse. And that is when a decision is made. A dangerous one. Andy Sachs is offered a job at Runway. Not as an assistant this time, but as features editor. And the reason is simple. She is one of the few journalists still trusted by the public. But there is one problem. Miranda Priestly was never consulted. And when Andy walks back into Runway, the past is waiting for her. But what she doesn't know yet is that this time she is not just returning to a job, she is walking into a war. Andy steps into Runway again, but everything feels smaller. The once glamorous empire is now controlled by meetings, metrics, and money. Gone is the old creative chaos. Now everything is monitored. Even Miranda is monitored. And when Andy finally sees her again, time freezes. Miranda doesn't react. No shock, no anger, just silence. As if Andy is already irrelevant. But behind that calm expression, something is brewing. Andy is assigned a task. Fix Runway's reputation. Fast. Because advertisers are leaving, and the magazine is bleeding influence. But the deeper Andy goes, the more she realizes something terrifying. Runway is no longer a fashion empire. It is a collapsing brand trying to survive the digital age. Clicks matter more than creativity. Influence matters more than integrity. And while Andy tries to rebuild meaningful journalism inside Runway, she meets resistance everywhere, especially from Miranda. But Miranda is not the same either. She is controlled now, restricted, watched, even forced to hang her own coat. A small humiliation, but symbolic of a bigger fall. Still, Miranda remains dangerous, because even weakened, she is still Miranda Priestly. Meanwhile, Andy reconnects with old faces. Nigel returns, still brilliant, still loyal, still exhausted. Emily Charlton returns too, but she is no longer an assistant. She is now a senior executive at Dior, and she has not forgiven the past. The tension between old colleagues begins to rise again. But what none of them realize yet is that Runway is not just collapsing from the outside. It is being quietly reshaped from within. And Andy is standing in the center of it. Now everything begins to change. Andy pitches bold investigative stories. Real journalism. Stories that matter. But Runway rejects them. They want safe content, sponsored content, controlled content. Meanwhile, a new force enters the story. A tech billionaire, a man who wants to modernize Runway. But modernization is just a polite word for control. At the same time, Emily is caught between loyalty and ambition. Dior depends on Runway. Runway depends on Dior. And Emily stands in the middle like a weapon waiting to be used. But the biggest shock is yet to come. Andy uncovers something disturbing. Runway's leadership is willing to sacrifice journalism itself just to survive. And Miranda knows it, but she is trapped. For the first time in her life, she is not the most powerful person in the room. Andy begins to understand something horrifying. The industry she loves is dying not by accident, but by design. Then comes the turning point. A massive scandal breaks. Everything Runway built begins to crumble. And suddenly, Andy is forced to make a choice. Save Runway or expose it. But no matter what she chooses, someone will be destroyed. And Miranda Priestly is no longer just her former boss. She is now either an ally or an enemy, and nobody knows which one she will become.
As the film enters its final act, everything at Runway is collapsing at once. The scandal has gone public, the fast fashion controversy is no longer controllable, advertisers are pulling out in real time, staff are panicking, board members are preparing emergency meetings, and for the first time in its history, Runway doesn't feel powerful. It feels fragile, almost human. And at the center of this storm is Andy Sachs. She is no longer just an outsider trying to survive fashion journalism. She is now the person everyone is looking at for answers, because she represents something Runway has lost: integrity. But what makes this moment even more intense is this: Andy is not alone. In the middle of chaos, something unexpected happens. Miranda Priestly reaches out to Andy, not through a command, not through authority, but personally, quietly, almost vulnerably. This is not the Miranda who once destroyed careers with a look. This is a woman watching her empire collapse in slow motion, and for the first time, she is not in control. She tells Andy something simple but powerful. Runway cannot survive another scandal like this, but there is a way out. One final editorial piece, one story that could reset everything, but it has to be perfect. And more importantly, it has to be honest. This moment becomes the emotional turning point of the entire film. Andy and Miranda, once toxic opposites, are now forced into the same direction. Not as friends, not as equals, but as two women trying to save something they both built in different ways. Nigel joins them, still loyal, still brilliant, still exhausted by the industry he once loved. Even Emily returns into the fold, but her energy has changed. She is no longer chasing status blindly. She now understands what that chase costs. And slowly, something surprising begins to happen. Old enemies start working like a team, not because they trust each other, but because they have no other choice. Andy takes the lead on the final piece. This is not a fashion article, not a soft PR recovery piece. This is journalism in its purest form. She digs into everything: the corporate manipulation, the advertiser pressure, the erosion of editorial independence, and the quiet death of real reporting. It is raw, it is risky, and it could destroy Runway completely. But Miranda allows it. That alone is shocking, because Miranda Priestly has spent her entire life controlling narratives, and now she is letting one slip out of her hands. In the aftermath, Miranda is forced into the most difficult moment of her life. She is asked to step down, not because she failed at fashion, but because the world she ruled no longer exists in the same way. But Miranda does something unexpected. She doesn't fight it. She accepts it, not with defeat, but with clarity. For the first time, we see Miranda not as a monster, but as someone who understands cost. She built an empire, but it demanded everything from her: relationships, family, peace, time. And now she finally understands. You can rule an industry, but still lose your life. Andy has offered something new after the success of the article: a future at Runway. Security, status, influence, the same cycle begins again. But she hesitates, because she now sees the truth Miranda once warned about in her own way. Every powerful system asks for something in return, and Andy has already paid enough. So she makes her choice. She walks away, not in failure, but in understanding. As Andy leaves Runway behind, the final message of the film becomes clear. This is not just a story about fashion, or journalism, or power. It is about survival in systems that constantly demand more than they give back. Miranda represents legacy power. Andy represents modern truth-seeking journalism.
Emily represents ambition shaped by survival. Nigel represents loyalty to a dying industry. And Runway itself? Runway represents an old world trying to survive in a new one. But in the end, no empire lasts forever. The film closes not with glamour, but with change. Miranda standing alone, Andy walking forward, and Runway, no longer untouchable, now just another name in a shifting industry. Because in the end, fashion fades, media evolves, power shifts. But truth? Truth is the only thing that refuses to disappear.